This is a really large area now, and it's an area that you tend only to get quite small questions on, 4-mark questions, 6-mark questions, but students do quite badly on this area typically, and I think it's because it's a little bit drier, it's a bit, there's a lot to learn here, as you can see, but let's go through this a little quite quickly so that you get it all, and remember, it is an important area, and it's an area you can show off in, because if it does come up on the exam, students tend to do poorly on it. So we're looking at organisational structure. So basically it's just the way the business is organised, and it also should set out the routes of communication, who has the power, who has responsibility over other people, roles and titles, and who people report to, so who is their line manager, that type of thing. So first definition then, levels of hierarchy. So there's a number of layers within the organisation. And organisations can either be kind of tall, here's a tall organisation, so this is relatively tall compared to my flat one that I've done here, but I would say a tall one has more than 4 layers of hierarchy in it, to be honest, and then flat here compared to the tall one where it only has 2 layers of hierarchy. So what are the benefits and what are the disadvantages of having a tall structure and a flat structure? Well, I'm just going to kind of briefly go through some of these so we get through this quite quickly, but the tall structure benefits are there's lots of scope for promotion and to kind of move up the business, so this could be very motivational, it might increase productivity if you have a tall structure, whereas the benefits of a flat structure would be that you're close to the decision makers at the top. So maybe you have some influence, and again, that might be very motivational. Maybe you'll be consulted about decision making. However, problems of a tall structure. I'd say that it might be more, there's more layers of hierarchy. Oh, I always spell hierarchy wrong. Oh, there we go. Hierarchy for communication to pass through. So if we just go back to this diagram, if the managing director has something he wants to pass down to the analyst here, it has to go through 3 layers of hierarchy. Now, in modern days, it's like, have you heard of email? It's really efficient. Have you heard of, like, I don't know, making an announcement in a meeting? But typically, these lines would be the way that communication is passed up and down, and key messages are emphasised, and you'll typically get more miscommunication happening, and the diseconomy of scale of communication as you get bigger than you do with a flatter organisation, so there might be more miscommunication opportunities, which obviously would not be good. And what are the problems of a flat structure? Well, as you can see here, you tend to have what we call a wider span of control. Now, we'll go on to what a wide span of control actually is in a second. Different fonts here.
Have you started working with you?
So this would mean that there's a wider span of control, and we're going to go into what that is in a second, but just briefly, that can be quite stressful for somebody if they're managing more people. So here's a little joke slide for you to look at organisational structures, and obviously this person's at the bottom here, so you can understand why it's funny. Okay, so span of control basically is the number of people who are directly responsible to a manager. So I can't really draw on this presentation, but if I take you back to this slide, we can see this manager has control for 2 people here. So I would call that a narrow span of control. Whereas here we've got this managing director, and they have a responsibility for all of these analysts. So we've got 3, 6, 9, 12 analysts under them, so a really wide span of control. So what are the benefits and what are the problems of these narrow and wide spans of control? So if you've got a narrow span of control, maybe you can have closer supervision, and that could be good if you have maybe newer staff or maybe less skilled staff who need training. There are also, when you have a narrow span of control, say if I go back to this diagram, say if this manager here leaves, it's likely that these 2 analysts below them will apply for the job that the manager has. So there's kind of there's a bit of hope there for them. There's a bit of promotional opportunity, and again, it might be quite motivational. So we've got kind of maybe motivational because there's more promotion opportunity. Whereas with a wide span of control, it's kind of good for the business because you're reducing the managerial costs of the business because you probably have fewer managers if they're all managing more people each. And possibly working in larger teams. And that can be good for kind of sharing ideas as well. So if we look at the problems of having a narrow span of control, I would say I'm just going to kind of invert that problem there. So it'd be more expensive than having a wide span of control. Wide span of control. Shouldn't have put a capital letter there. And the problems of having a wide span of control, as we said before, is more employees to manage. It could be more stressful. So you've got more training needs to look at, you've got more appraisals to go through, more output to check occasionally, and so on and so on. So another term for you here, chain of command. So this is just the instructions passed down from higher levels of the hierarchy to lower levels of the hierarchy. So, you know, you could say, well, who's my line manager and who is their line manager and who's their line manager? That's basically looking at the chain of command. And delayering, there has been a question on this before, so watch out for these. Delayering is when an organisation just completely takes out a layer of the hierarchy. So I've got a nice diagram here. Here we have our hierarchy. Here's some delayering, and there it goes. So we see that these directors are actually, whereas before they had quite a narrow span of control, they've just got a wider span of control because they're going to be managing these analysts here. So why would a business do this? It's actually quite common. One of the advantages is that it reduces the number of layers you have in your business. So that should speed up communication and make it a little bit faster and a little bit more efficient. It removes this whole layer of management as well, and these managers probably get paid quite well, so it reduces your costs. So you might think, well, why don't get rid of the lower layer? And the reason is that these people are probably not paid as much as these people, and maybe these people, their jobs are possibly a little bit more essential than the managers, possibly. I don't know, it depends upon the business. And it also, you could say, well, it's very motivational because some of the work's going to have to be from these managers distributed. Some of it might go up and some of it might go down, so it could be motivational. But the directors might become very overburdened with the more work that they have, and because you've got that wider span of control, it's more stressful, and there may be less chance of promotion because there's obviously, you know, you're going to have to, if you want to be promoted as an analyst, you now have to look at being promoted to a director, which is a bigger jump than a manager. Layering is the opposite, so you're adding a layer in, and it occurs when the business is growing, so that they need to get more layers of management, and so it can kind of reduce this burden on senior management, and it can kind of reduce the span of control. However, obviously with more layers, communication becomes a little bit harder. So here's another little joke for you, joke slide that I thought was quite funny. Okay, centralisation and decentralisation. These are some diagrams of what centralised organisations and decentralised organisations look like. So centralised is just where here we go, the majority of decisions are made by senior managers, whereas decentralised is pushing decision-making down the structure, so decentralising that decision-making process. So the advantages of it being centralised is that these decisions can be made quickly because you don't need to kind of consult people, and the senior management are thought to maybe make decisions more in line with the aims of the business. So we've got consistency, hopefully, you're meant to have. Whereas decentralisation delegates power, really, and maybe empowers some people, maybe very motivational. And it may move the decision making closer to the customer, and it may allow some of the offices or the firms to make decisions that really suit the local needs of the customers as well. Okay, so organisational structures now. So a hierarchical or a traditional, or sometimes called a functional structure, is basically what I was showing you right at the beginning. So you have one, it looks like a pyramid, basically. It's a hierarchical structure. And your advantages of this, it's pyramid shape, and it tends to be based on departments. So it's quite maybe bureaucratic leadership style. So you have the marketing department, finance department, HR, operations. It's usually quite tall and there's narrow spans of control, and it's usually for a business that's been around for quite a while, a long established business. These are just a few advantages and disadvantages. I'm not going to kind of go into all the detail because it's already a long presentation. But it's quite clear who is in charge of who and what is each person's role. So it's very clear. It gives a lot of clarity, we could say. However, the communication tends to be pushed down rather than kind of sideways. So it's upwards and downwards communication. So you report to your line manager and maybe you give information, you pass it on to your subordinates. But maybe the manager of the HR department doesn't really talk to the manager of the marketing department very often. So you don't get that sideways communication. So to solve that problem, another structure you can get is a matrix style of structure. So you have all of these departments, as we had before, but they also have teams that they work in that are more like sideways departments, so people of a similar level working together. And sometimes it's to, on specific projects that you get these people to work together. So you might have a project bringing out a new product and you think, right, we'll have some people from marketing, some people from ops, some people from HR, just to see, to get their expertise. So your advantages, it's really good for working in projects because you get a lot of skill and experience from different areas, and it enables a more flexible use of the workforce than just being stuck in your kind of department. But it does cause a bit of confusion and split loyalty. So who do you report to? Is it the person that's in your technical department, or is it your project manager? So that could cause a bit of split loyalty. And it could become a bit blurred, especially if those two people are telling you to do different things. Okay, another structure is an entrepreneurial structure. Now, this is only really relevant when you're just starting up a business. So you have the person that started up the business, the entrepreneur maybe in the middle, and then everybody reports to him or her. So you have a core team at the middle, and it's completely flat, really. You just have that one person making the decisions and everyone else reports to them. So your advantages are fast decision making because you're just going to one person. But as the work expands, as you get into a larger business, you can't run that type of organisation because it would just be far too complicated. You'd have far too much work. And then finally, yay, nearly at the end, is your independent or independent structure. And there's no obvious structure to this. It's just where maybe these people are at a similar level, so used in GPs practices or solicitors. And they're maybe specialists in their own fields, and they kind of make collective decisions. So it goes very well with the democratic style of leadership. But there's no kind of clear leader. I suppose they're all leaders. And it allows a high degree of autonomy, so control over what they want to do for each employee. But there may be a slight lack of coordination if there's not one person saying, right, this is the way we're going to do it. And you may get disagreements between the different people as well. One area to look at is functional departments. So because this unit's broken down into marketing, finance, or accounting, operations, and human resources, it's important to have an overview of the impact that these have on each other. So I'm not going to fill this in, but occasionally you do get questions that say the marketing department is the most important department, discuss, or the human resources department is the most important department, discuss, that type of question. And obviously you'd have to be able to talk about, well, what is so important about human resources and what impact does it have on the business, and all of those good things. But you'd also need to talk about the impact that the other departments have and the importance of the other departments as well. So have a think about how they all affect. How does the marketing department affect the finance department, operations, and human resources? And then go through them, try and kind of come up with some ideas for these. So long presentation there, but really important. Students typically do not revise this area and then they perform really badly on the exam on this.